My family joked that my girlfriend was temporary at a birthday toast right in front of her. I smiled, let it slide, and let them keep talking, until she stood up and thanked them for revealing exactly who wouldn't be invited to the wedding. This all started on a quiet afternoon when my family gathered to celebrate my uncle's birthday, and I did not expect anything more dramatic than too much food and the usual awkward small talk. I had brought my girlfriend Alara with me, and I remember thinking on the drive there that this was the first time she would be around everyone at once. I am in my early 30s and Alara is in her late 20s, and we had been together long enough that I considered her part of my future, even if I had not said that out loud to everyone yet. My family, however, had a habit of treating relationships like passing hobbies until a ring appeared, and even then they liked to test boundaries. The house was already loud when we arrived. Music played softly in the background and the smell of roasted food filled the air. Alara squeezed my hand as we stepped inside and smiled at my relatives even though I could feel her nerves through that small gesture. She always tried to be polite and open even when people made it difficult. My mother greeted us warmly enough, but there was something distracted in her eyes, as if she was already bracing for comments she knew might come later. My cousins hovered nearby laughing and whispering, and my uncle the birthday man moved through the room like a proud host enjoying the attention. For the first hour everything seemed fine. Alara helped in the kitchen and laughed at stories she had heard me tell before. A few relatives asked her about her work, and she answered patiently even when the same questions came up more than once. I noticed though that no one asked us about our plans or how long we had been together. It was like there was an unspoken agreement to keep her in a temporary category. I told myself I was imagining it and that I was being overly sensitive because I cared about her. When it was time for the toast, everyone gathered around the dining table. Glasses were filled and my uncle stood up clearing his throat with exaggerated seriousness. He started thanking everyone for coming and reminiscing about past birthdays. People laughed and nodded along. Then his tone shifted slightly and he gestured toward me with his glass. He joked about how I always brought a new girl to family events and how it kept things interesting. Laughter rippled around the table and my stomach dropped. I forced a smile and glanced at Alara, who was still smiling but more tightly now. My uncle continued and said something about how Alara seemed nice, but who knew how long she would be around. He added that everyone was used to seeing temporary girlfriends at these things. More laughter followed, and this time it was louder. Someone else chimed in saying it was good not to get too attached yet. The words hung in the air heavy and careless. I felt heat rise in my face and I could tell Alara had gone very still beside me. I did not interrupt, I did not speak up. I told myself that causing a scene would only make things worse and that maybe the jokes would stop on their own. They did not stop. Another relative added that it was good Alara had a sense of humor because she would need it if she planned to stick around. Someone else joked about placing bets. Each comment landed harder than the last and every one of them was followed by laughter that felt cruel in its ease. I could hear my own breathing and I realized my hands were clenched under the table. I hated that I was smiling. I hated that I was letting it slide. I told myself I would talk to my family later in private and that this was not the moment. Then Alara stood up. The room went quiet almost instantly. She did not look angry. She did not look hurt in the way people expect. She looked calm and composed and very clear. She thanked my uncle for the toast and said she appreciated the honesty. She said it was refreshing to know exactly where she stood and who viewed her as temporary. She smiled and said it was helpful information for the future. No one laughed. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. She continued and said that it was good to learn these things now rather than later. She said she believed families should be welcoming and kind, especially when someone they cared about brought a partner into the room. She added that she was grateful for the clarity because it made decisions easier. She thanked everyone again and sat back down. The silence that followed felt endless. My uncle looked confused and embarrassed. My cousins stared at their glasses. My mother looked at me with something like shock and maybe pride. I felt a mix of emotions rush through me: relief, shame, admiration, all at once. Alara reached for my hand again and this time her grip was steady. No one continued the toast. Conversation slowly resumed, but it was forced and awkward. The laughter did not come back. I realized in that moment that Alara had done what I could not. She had drawn a line without raising her voice or insulting anyone. She had simply accepted their words and shown them the weight of those words. That was the moment I understood something important. She was not temporary. The way she handled herself showed more strength and grace than anyone else in that room. And I knew that whatever came next would change how my family saw us, or at least how much access they would have to our lives. The moment my family joked that my girlfriend was temporary at a birthday toast, I knew something had cracked that could not be repaired by pretending it did not matter. I am still replaying the way the room sounded when they laughed and how Alara sat beside me calm while I froze. After she thanked them for revealing exactly who they were, I realized this was not just about one cruel moment, but about years of small dismissals that had finally come into focus. We left not long after that, and the drive home was quiet in a heavy, thoughtful way. Elara looked out the window, and I focused on the road, feeling ashamed that I had not defended her sooner. When we got back to my place, she finally spoke and said she was not angry, but she was disappointed. She said she had felt like a guest being evaluated rather than a person being welcome. I apologized over and over, and she stopped me gently and said she did not need apologies, she needed to know where I stood. That question sat between us like a test I had been studying for my entire life without realizing it. I told her that she was not temporary to me and that I had been planning to propose but had wanted the timing to feel right. Saying it out loud felt terrifying and relieving at the same time. She smiled softly and said that hearing it mattered more than any ring at that moment. The next few days were uncomfortable. Messages started coming in from relatives who claimed the jokes were harmless and that Alara had overreacted. Some suggested she was too sensitive or that she should learn how our family teased each other. I read every message and felt a growing clarity. These were the same people who had always blurred the line between humor and disrespect. I responded politely but firmly, saying that what happened was not acceptable and that Alara deserved an apology. A few messages stopped after that. Others doubled down. I noticed who stayed silent too, and that silence told me more than the words ever could. Alara did not ask me to cut anyone off. She did not demand anything. She simply watched how I handled it. I realized this was the first real test of our partnership. It was easy to say I loved her when things were calm. It was harder when choosing her meant pushing back against my own family. One evening while we were cooking dinner, she asked me quietly what I wanted our future to look like. I told her I wanted a life where we felt respected and safe and supported. I said I did not want our children, if we had any, to hear jokes about whether their mother belonged. The words surprised me as I said them because they felt solid and final. We talked about boundaries late into the night. We talked about what we would tolerate and what we would not. Alara said she did not want to be the reason I lost my family, but she also would not accept being treated as less than. I told her she was not the problem and never had been. For the first time, I felt like I was choosing a path instead of drifting along one laid out for me. A week later, my mother called and asked to meet. She said she had not slept well since the party and that seeing Alara stand up for herself had made her rethink a lot of things. We met at a small cafe and she admitted that the family had been wrong. She said they had assumed I would eventually settle down with someone else and that it was unfair and cruel. Hearing her say that felt like a door opening. It was not everything, but it was something. As we left the cafe, my phone buzzed again with another message from a cousin making light of the situation. I did not reply. I put the phone away and took Alara's hand. I realized then that the wedding she had mentioned in her response at the party was not a threat or a joke. It was a boundary. And the people who crossed it would not have a place in the life we were building together. My family joked that my girlfriend was temporary at a birthday toast right in front of her, and that was the moment everything finally lined up in my head. I am in my early 30s and had spent most of my life smoothing things over and telling myself that family humor was just rough around the edges. Alara was sitting beside me with her hands folded in her lap when my uncle raised his glass and said it was nice of me to bring a practice girlfriend before I found someone permanent. Laughter rippled across the table like it was a rehearsed punchline. I felt my face heat up and I smiled out of reflex because that was what I had always done. Alara did not smile. She stayed still and listened, and when the laughter died, she stood up and thanked them for revealing exactly who would not be invited to the wedding. The room went silent in a way that felt physical, like the air had thickened. I remember the scrape of her chair and the way my aunt stared at her plate. Someone tried to laugh again and it came out thin and awkward. My mother opened her mouth and then closed it. I did nothing for a second that felt like an hour, and then I stood up too and put my hand on Alara's back. We did not argue. We did not explain. We left while people stared at us like we had broken an unspoken rule. In the car, my hands shook on the steering wheel and Alara breathed slowly like she was grounding herself. She did not cry. She did not yell. She thanked me for leaving with her, and that made the guilt hit harder because it should have been obvious. The next morning, my phone was full of messages that tried to rewrite what happened. Some said it was a joke taken out of context. Others said Alara embarrassed the family. One message asked why she was so sensitive. I read them all and noticed how none of them asked if she was okay. When Alara woke up, she asked if I was all right, and I told her I was embarrassed by myself more than anything. I admitted that I had let those jokes happen for years because it was easier than confronting them. She said she understood, but that understanding did not erase the sting. She said she loved me and wanted a future with me, but she needed to know I would not let her be a target again. That afternoon, we walked through the neighborhood and talked about what respect actually looked like. It was not dramatic gestures or grand speeches. It was consistency. It was choosing each other when it was uncomfortable. I told her I had been thinking about proposing and had hesitated because I wanted things to be calm first. She stopped walking and looked at me and said calm should not be the condition for commitment. That stuck with me. We agreed that if we were going to build a life together, we would set boundaries early and keep them. I called my parents and asked to meet without Alara because I did not want her to feel like she was on trial. We sat at their kitchen table where I grew up, and I told them plainly that what happened was not acceptable. I said Alara was my partner and would be my wife, and that jokes questioning her place were not harmless. My father looked tired and my mother looked defensive at first, but then she softened. She admitted they had assumed I would eventually move on, and that assumption had shaped their behavior. Hearing it said out loud felt like confirmation of something I had always sensed. I told them assumptions would not dictate my life anymore. When I got home, Alara was cooking and humming to herself. I told her what was said and what I had said in return. She listened and nodded and said thank you for taking that step. We talked about the guest list not in anger but with clarity. She said the wedding should be filled with people who celebrated us, not tolerated us. I agreed and felt a surprising sense of peace. The joke at the birthday toast had been cruel, but it had also been honest. It showed us exactly where we stood and gave us the chance to choose differently. My family joked that my girlfriend was temporary at a birthday toast right in front of her, and that moment kept replaying in my head in the weeks that followed because it became the line between the life I used to accept and the one I was finally choosing. After that night, the tone of every interaction changed. Calls felt careful, messages felt tested. Some relatives went quiet completely while others doubled down and tried to smooth it over by pretending nothing serious had happened. Elara noticed everything even when she did not comment on it. She has always been perceptive in a way that does not demand attention but quietly absorbs details. I could tell she was watching to see what I would do next, not because she doubted me but because patterns matter more than promises. We started planning our future in a way that felt different from before, not bigger or louder but clearer. We talked about the wedding as something intentional instead of obligatory. We talked about guest lists without guilt and traditions without fear. Every time a familiar name came up, we asked ourselves whether that person had ever truly respected our relationship. Sometimes the answer surprised me. People I assumed would be obvious inclusions were suddenly questionable when viewed through that lens. Elara never pushed. She let me come to conclusions on my own, and when I did, she supported them without hesitation. A few weeks later, my cousin hosted a small family dinner and invited us both. I asked Alara how she felt about going, and she said she would follow my lead. That answer made the decision clear. I told my cousin we would not attend unless there was an acknowledgement of what had happened. Not an apology wrapped in excuses, but a recognition that the comment had crossed a line. The response took a day, and when it came, it was short and defensive. They said everyone was joking and that Alara had escalated things unnecessarily. I thanked them for the invitation and declined. When I told Alara, she smiled sadly and said at least now we knew. The distance that followed was uncomfortable but also strangely calm. Holidays came and went with fewer obligations. We spent time with friends who had become chosen family over the years, people who asked questions and listened to answers, people who celebrated us openly. During one quiet evening at home, I finally proposed. It was simple and private and perfect for us. Alara said yes without hesitation, and the joy on her face erased every lingering doubt I had ever carried. In that moment, I understood that partnership is not about managing other people's feelings. It is about standing together when those feelings turn against you. News of the engagement spread quickly and reactions were mixed. Some relatives congratulated us warmly as if nothing had ever happened. Others were silent. One aunt called and asked if the wedding would change things, and I told her it already had. We sent out invitations selectively and intentionally. There was no announcement or explanation. The list spoke for itself. Elara handled it with grace that still amazes me. She never gloated. She never held grudges. She simply moved forward with clarity and self-respect. On the day of the wedding, I looked around the room and felt something settle inside me. The people present were there because they believed in us. Not because of obligation or expectation, but because they wanted to witness our commitment. Elara walked toward me with a calm confidence that made my chest ache, and I knew we had done the right thing. When we exchanged vows, there was no trace of the old tension or the old jokes, only warmth and sincerity and relief. Later that night, as we danced and laughed, someone asked if I missed having more family there. I thought about it honestly and realized I did not. What I would have missed was this piece. That birthday toast had been meant as a joke, but it had revealed something essential. It showed us who saw Alara as temporary and who saw her as family. I smiled, then not out of reflex but out of certainty. Sometimes the most uncomfortable moments are the ones that finally teach you how to choose.